Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Jed, and I've just swapped a few things around with my microphone, trying out something new. I hope it sounds okay for those who are following along on YouTube. We are today in the Midwifery book. We're in chapter 2. We are looking at section 5, which is the section on anger and blame, understanding what role anger and blame play in our problems. And we're wondering about what follows if we have we bring this kind of understanding with us into our own roles as parents or authority figures. Can we avoid the transmission of the pathologos altogether to begin with? I think we read last time the question, what alternative is there to the human parent recognizing the child in a state of self, state of excellence, a state of following their own seeing, expression, goals, but it's a way of being that is outside of the scope of the parent due to the parent's own lack of reflecting on and discovering their own pathologos and removing themselves from their that pernicious entity, to quote the text, due to their block, passing the being triggered by the expression of self or logos in the kid, and then being triggered in a way where they would impose a pathologo that is designed to get them to reject that level of participation in self-being or self-logos, or exploration of their own mind. Those are the big ones, of course. So the question asked was, well, what alternative is there? What if we don't succumb to that triggering experience and we don't pass on the pathologos that we had when we were young, because we have an awareness of it now and hopefully soon be free of it? He talked about a higher level of functioning would result in the household. It would emerge, and we called it maturity and integrity. And we point to it being the natural byproduct of simply a refusal to play the pathologos game. In other words, it doesn't seem to be anything additional we'd have to add other than allow self-ousia, self-reflection with self-logos. Because the removal of that block is all that's needed for the mature and greater integrity kind of relationship that would emerge. Which is interesting, because that would mean we are good as we are. We have what we need to function in a mature and just way. We just have to not buy into the psychic parasite of the pathologos to allow self to develop. So it's not about being right or wrong. It's a kind of relationship with respect to learning. Which is neat. That's where we are in the text. Let's jump in and keep reading. Okay. Let's reread this last section. Authorities then are not to be blamed for the imposition of the pathologos onto our lives, which has such a destructive consequence. But they are, however, responsible They are responsible for not having challenged their own pathologos and not purging themselves of that pernicious entity. Every time they insist on the truth of their pathologos, they are responsible for creating the conditions of the transmission. So here we have, what are we doing instead of blame? Our responsibility for ourselves and how we react to others, a responsibility to reflect on ourselves, our functioning, our problems, and the pathologos false belief about ourselves that we are carrying without realizing it because it wasn't put into words because of the conditions of being a child in human society. Nevertheless, it's our responsibility to now put the words on it, to bring it to light, to reflect on it with maturity and integrity, and drop it if it's false and bad and harmful. That's what we're doing instead. Every time we insist on the truth of our pathologos, we are responsible for creating the conditions for the transmission. Not only do we benefit, pulling out of the cycle of violence. There is no unconscious motive at work. Consider, parents and authorities do know what they are doing and insist on their right to do it. But one thing escapes them, and it is this, that is decisive. The thing that escapes them is they are not able to grasp the significance of what they are doing. The significance escapes them because they refuse to look at the consequences of playing out the pathologos dramas. What is the meaning of this refusal? When parental authorities are faced with ways of being or actions that appear threatening to them, big question, why does excellence or participating in self or participating in self-logos, what would it mean for it to be considered a threat? What does that say about the person and the underlying false beliefs that they have a responsibility to purge themselves from? So when they are faced with ways of being or actions that appear threatening to them, they create the conditions for the transmission of the pathologos. But what alternative is there? To allow the child free expression of those states of mind and ways of being would mean a higher level of functioning that would have to be permitted within the home or school, which is a good thing. Hooray. I think that I'm going to turn down the sound effects a little bit. I think that's okay. If the free expression could be dealt with maturely, it would be no issue. A higher level of functioning would emerge. Maturity and integrity would be the natural product. But this could only be possible if the adult first faced their own restrictive pathologos functioning. So once again, we are seeing that the imperative for us, like our purpose here, our direction here, what we should be doing, must be for our self-benefit first and primarily. Just like in philosophy, how can you do good without yourself knowing what the good is? One of the questions we are asking of Meno, which we're reading. Meaning, well, you probably should know the good if you want to spend your life helping people, which means get into philosophy, discover what knowledge is, discover what the good is. What kind of experience is it? Can it be understood? Can the understanding and the nous experience of it be used together to therefore benefit someone? Similar here, we, in order to be a good influence, we have to ourselves first go on our quest to discover and free ourselves from our own pathologos. But We also have a kind of moral imperative, as we saw here, our responsibility up here. That's where we are in the text. Let's pull up my highlighter. There we go. Get my pen. Whoop. Okay, that's crazy. Here we are. Again, what does this mean? It means the pathologos effectively blocked a higher mental functioning. So here we go. Pathologos block higher mental functioning. This is the stake. This is what we sacrifice for having a pathologos. The ability to explore the consequences of one's most important act. That's the ability we don't do. The ability to explore the consequences of one's most important act. You might recognize that as one of the 4 categories of the dialectic. You might also recognize, in order to explore the consequences, you have to be reflecting on your experiences. Reflecting on experiences, or who's here. So there's our activity of reflection, or turning mind upon itself to know the mind. The self-logos being the dialectical structure which you could use to explore the consequences. And of course, the oneself being the final goal. Which isn't here, but it's the one missing term. Logos, mind, and self. The 3 big ones. Okay, so it keeps relationships on an immature level. So this is an insight on what a mature relationship would therefore be. Find someone with whom you can reflect on the experiences you have so that you can explore the consequences of your most important act. Find yourself a girl who can do that. Because that would be a mature kind of relationship. There's the book. The pathologos ensures mediocrity. Ugh. Okay, that's not good. We don't want that. That's okay. Here we go. Pathologos ensures mediocrity. That's a bumper sticker. By blocking the understanding. There we go. There's the big bombshell. Pathologos ensures mediocrity. Why? Blocks understanding. Definition and demonstration, maybe. It is the major obstacle of our mindful development. Therefore, any tradition that's interested in mindfulness or spiritual development needs to be doing this, because it's the major obstacle in that whole process. So, tell your friends, tell your co-workers, tell the people meditating at the ashram with you, tell them this, and then duck when they throw their rice bowl at you, because adding another idea into a tradition, isn't that naughty? Bad? Because how will we judge whether or not the addition is legitimate? We best just believe the scriptures or our teacher. Unless, of course, we can think for ourselves, in which case we might be able to add to a tradition, which is exactly what we're doing here by formalizing philosophical midwifery, which is something that Socrates talked about doing, but not something that Plato documented, which is a shame because Socrates didn't write anything down. So we are adding this back into the tradition with some extra ideas that Socrates may not have had. So we can do that. because we're in the logos, because we necessarily have to learn the logos in order to remove the major obstacle to rational or mature relationships with people we want to have mature relationships with, and our own mindful development. Two things that are top. Right? Wouldn't that be neat? Mindful development and this kind of mature relationship. As a result, it is the cause of our failure to participate in the higher reaches of mind. So we're also cause of our failure, so that's important. So let's cause of our failure, that's important. But also let's highlight this, because that would mean that our author considers participating in the highest reaches of mind is the culmination of our mindfulness development, the consequences of a mature relationship. Both parties not only are learning, so there's no mistakes, no rewards and punishments, no justifications for the implication, for the pushing of for the what's the word? Introduction, for the imposition of the pathologos. What would you be doing instead? Think about every other relationship you've ever seen. Think about a lot of relationships where it's a conflict between beliefs. Think about relationships where people have a different religious or cultural background. Do they spend their time insisting on the validity of their own specific pathologos or roles within it? If you didn't have to do that, so there'd be no conflict, because both people are interested in mindfulness development and mastery of the self-logos and dialectic, which is understanding based and not belief based or cultural based. You could say it's the cultural heritage of humanity, if you want to talk about the Greeks, or perennial philosophy, the parent philosophy, back before philosophies were opinions as they are today, back when it was actually just true understanding. We could call it the perennial philosophy. We call philosophy that sometimes. Nevertheless, bit of a tangent. Nevertheless, you have to ask the question, well, what would be the consequence of that relationship, free of those problems and dramas? Would you both end up participating in the higher reaches of mind? Would that be where it goes? And what are those higher reaches of mind? What are they like? Are they awesome? Is it worth sacrificing our problems to reach it? Is it worth learning a new art, the logos and dialectic? It's nice to get these little clues from somebody who, has mastered this, about what our goals are. And even if we do read something like this, a clue about our higher purpose to participate in the highest reaches of mind, it's likely only going to shine up if you already have an understanding that is kind of pointing in that direction anyway, which is why we do philosophy. You realize, oh, hang on a second, it's a development from being attached to physical things to wondering about causes and principles, which awakes the philosophy, because they have to exist somewhere. What is that existence? And if we call the existence of being, where those causes and principles exist eternally and are knowable, could we call that mind? In which case, what's the highest levels of participation in that mind, where the causes, principles, and eternal beings live? So if you've been doing philosophy along with us on our channel, if this would stick out. it's good to get a confirmation that if you're carrying that theory anyway, hang on, maybe our goal isn't to amass physical wealth or fame, but to explore and maybe reach the highest levels of our own consciousness, which might turn out to be reality itself somehow, and which itself might be a kind of passageway to what is even experiencing that. If you are wondering about that and wanting to check that place out and do those things, having a pathologos will be the cause of your failure to do that. So if you're doing philosophy, you best be doing this too. For we often find that the justification for this personal condemnation of a child is the belief that intimidation teaches the child a moral lesson. Such garbage. And we've been talking about this a lot. Some variation of this is at play in systems of oppression. Because violence is used to maintain oppression. How do you justify violence? You can't unless you incorrectly think that inflicting physical pain somehow helps the learning and developmental process. And if you are saying that, you could say, well, I'm teaching them a lesson. I'm making them better. Of course, the premise is false. It's not how you learn anything. It's the opposite. And the lesson is actually not what you're intending, because as we read earlier, you're just teaching them to avoid you or be the one inflicting the suffering rather than copying it, or some other terrible lesson, not what you're intending. But also the sort of person who thinks this doesn't know the good anyway. So in principle, this sort of person shouldn't be allowed to practice this sort of thing, because they're showing their ignorance of morality. What is the good? What is virtue? And how can it be taught? How can you actually teach virtue? How can you actually teach moral lessons? It ain't by violence or intimidation, which is what? Using your power over the person to insist that whatever they're doing is just a justification of the enemy imagery or the wrongness, the innate badness of themselves. You stink and you need to be below me. You're just a peasant, says the king or says the priest or whatever. And I'm going to use my power to, every time you make a mistake, not use it to explore the nature of the logos and the pathologos, which is what we are here for, so that we can participate in the highest reaches of mind and maybe even know the self. Instead of doing any of that, I'm going to use that mistake to claim it proves this false, terrible, harmful pathologos-like belief about you. I'm going to use it to justify this false and bad thing. That's intimidation. What's the morality that you'd be teaching someone who engages in that? Nothing good, we can conclude. So, it's a belief that intimidation teaches a child a moral lesson. And we say, boo. There we go. Done, boo. Boo. Yet there is no evidence that would indicate the moral of the lesson has been taught. So what do we see? No evidence. So unless you are a baby brain, you better stop using this, or believing that it teaching a moral lesson can justify intimidation, violence, or punishment. No evidence. So to believe it anyway would make you a baby brain. Baby chicken says, don't be a baby brain. See, he's scolding you with his arm there. Don't be a baby. Thank you, chicken. There is no evidence to indicate that the moral of the lesson has been taught. Rather, the child learns instead to play that condemning role on others. Right? Ever seen little kids at kindergarten or something? They tend to want to play out the kind of punisher that their parents are to them whenever something happens. Some people seeking it out with greater urgency than others. Can be cute and funny, so long as we start introducing philosophical midwifery at kindergarten. It's funny if we can get out of it. Tragic if you can't. So, child learns to play that condemning role onto others, be the bullier. So we have something that's really prevalent right now. A lot of fascists, a lot of Nazis, a lot of people doing genocides at the time of this recording in human history. And but there's a role where the person inflicting the violence to teach a moral lesson, usually sometimes that lie is peddled out. Sometimes they don't even care. What are you going to do about it? Where's your money? Where's your weapons? Crazy way of being. Child learns to play that condemning role on others. Right. The ones doing this also are playing the victim, which is interesting. Because you need some sort of justification to do the violence. In other words, the person has to be made to be wrong so that you can teach them the right thing through this imposition of violence or intimidation. So these people with the power are claiming to be victims of something. They have been victimized. The nasty Palestinians tried to drink water. Well, that hurt my feelings because I don't like the idea of Palestinian people drinking. Or having medicine, or not being kept in a prison, or not being genocided. Hurts my feelings. So they're victimizing me. Now I get to punish them because I am the victim. So lie, it's kind of like a false flag. It's kind of like how wars are started. Create a fake scenario, respond to that fake scenario by doing the thing that you wanted to do. Violent invasion in terms of war. Or same thing on the political stage right now. Cry bullying, we call it. They're doing the bullying and crying victim. In other words, they are claiming to be suffering from the very thing that they go on to do themselves. What we are seeing here is there is a kind of truth behind that. Because if they are doing that condemning role in others, if the Jewish nation are doing a genocide, it may be in part caused by the fact that it was done to them. And unless we have this period in between having it done to us and then passing on that cycle of violence, the family curse, the pathologos tradition, and between doing it to others and having it done to us, we need to have a period of time here where we can do philosophical midwifery. So this doesn't happen. So there's no more genocides. So there's no more Nazis. Stop fighting Nazis. Silly human beings. Between doing more Nazi stuff and World War II, make this period of time in here a time where we do what we need to do so that we can escape this. Where's my sound drop? That's the problem. No one seems to be learning or growing or addressing actual problems. I might get rid of that meanwhile. Cut that out. That's from Some More News, a fantastic YouTube channel. And only the best and coolest people like Some More News on YouTube. That's where I got my drop from. Take out this breath. Problem. How many? I think I cut out the S. You guys don't have to be listening to this. Right, so this is the period of time between this and this. Now, if this is the case, if this isn't just a theory, if there's legitimacy to everything we're doing, and I don't see any reason why there couldn't be, you could wonder, well, is this a principle that applies to other things? Are we as human beings experiencing this time here between wherever we were as non-physical beings, wherever we are going to? Of course, that would be the positive. This is the imposition of the false way of being and the false way of self. But if the true nature of our existence is we start off in the realm of being before we are incarnated, which is something that is talked about in the Phaedo and the Meno, because if we are learning about things like beauty, where do we learn that? You haven't seen beauty itself, you've only seen beautiful things. So where do you get the idea of beauty from? If it's something we know as a soul, so all learning is remembering, then our soul at one stage had to be here, outside of time, having experienced beauty itself, justice itself, sameness itself, all of the self-logos, principles and terms. So why the incarnation if we are only destined to return back to being? Similarly, the next level up. If the self unfolds into being, and even our return to the highest reaches of the mind is just a stepping stone or vestibule before or gateway in front of the self, then same question. Why the gap? Why the unfolding into creation and being at all? Well, here we are seeing there's something necessary we have to do. Learn something. Learn the art of midwifery, which requires us to, first of all, have the understanding or the definitions. Second of all, being able to demonstrate it. No good returning back to something with a skill that you haven't actually practiced. Hopefully practiced it in everything you do so that it's your way of being now, or division, so that when you return, or the fourth stage of the dialectic, you return having seen something new because of this process of reflection, usia, with the logos, the art of the dialectic, which is what midwifery is, and what philosophy is. So, this friend, this guy here, you, yeah, well, this is why. And don't worry anymore, be happy, because we have this book to understand what it was missing, how this tradition fits within Western spiritual and intellectual tradition, why it's been buried for about 1500 years, and why we have the potential to bring it back, and why it's necessary to bring it back. Because we have Nazis over here, and we have Nazis over here. We have someone having experienced the genocide and somebody doing it over here. We're not doing this part here. But we can. That's what we do on this channel. And that's why we have Owen Wilson joining us. And people clapping. And cheering. And a chicken. And a flamingo. It's all happening on my channel. Our philosophy channel. Okay. So, quite literally, we see that the lesson is continue this cycle of injustice, not anything good. or any actual learning. Now, we can also add that reflection back into what we've just been reading, because the idea is this is a lesson that you're being learned, a moral lesson, teaching a lesson. Well, if all learning is remembering, we can bring that in. Not only is that false because they're not actually learning anything good, they're not learning the lesson you're supposedly teaching, but because learning itself is a remembering, so you should be doing the opposite. Making it so you don't have to worry about your physical senses, so you're not being physically hurt or punished or put under any stress, so you can instead engage in the dialectic and we see a reflection on self and what's most significant, because that's how we remember. If learning is remembering, that's how you got to do it. Makes sense? If you go to a math class and you're going to learn a big new calculus equation, you don't have the math teacher wandering up to the smartest kid in class and whacking them on the head and go, now you're ready to learn, now that you are sad and in pain and suffering and you're a bad student. Whack. See? Now you're going to learn something new in calculus. Learning doesn't work that way, despite what the Catholic Church says. All right. In fact, since teaching these so-called moral lessons produces the pathologos, here we go. So this is a conclusion we had got to ourselves. The lesson is in itself immoral. Okay? So, since intimidation can teach the pathologos, not only is it not really teaching the thing that you want it to teach, it is instead immoral. And we say boo. And we say wah wah. And we say, I don't want to eat a monkey. Can the imposition of the pathologos be avoided? This is the question of the day. Or is it necessary? Is it a necessary phase we must all live with? This is a big one. Pathologos suck in that they cause us to have our problems and negative states of mind, be stuck in our problems, play it out over generations, impact whatever evolution we could be doing, but we can't because we're stuck in our problems because we haven't been doing midwifery. That all stinks. How can this be a just world if we get all that stuff? Or is there some sort of necessity as part of being a human to getting a pathologos? So these are the questions I have, and I've just shared them with you. So now we have them, and we can carry this as we continue to read. Okay. Can the imposition... Oops, let's undo that. Can the... And let's click on this. No. How do I... Can the imposition of the pathologos be avoided? Or is it necessary? A necessary phase we must all live with. Well, thank goodness it's a phase, meaning that implies that we get out of it, which is neat. Let us consider the question in a new way. What kind of parents living in what kind of circumstances would come closest to bringing their child into full development without creating the conditions for the pathologos? That's the family that I was supposed to be born into. This one. This is exactly it. This is where I was supposed to be growing up. I think a mistake was made. What kind of parents living in what kind of circumstances become the closest to bringing their child into full development without creating the conditions for the pathologos? And what kind of child, there's more to the question. What kind of child would it have to be? Does that mean that there are certain children who wouldn't even respond to this? What does that mean? We do not know the answer to that question. But we can hazard a guess. If it were possible, the parents and the child would be nurtured in. Oh, here we go. What's the guess? Here we go, everyone. If it were possible, and we have our fingers crossed, maybe all of a sudden this channel becomes popular for some reason, and two people meet themselves on the Discord, and they get married, and they might be these parents. And they could come back and tell us what their kid's like. And we'll be happy. The parents and the child, would be nurtured in the way of the Logos. Wow. So here we have a big term. It's even in italics, the way of the Logos. That's a big one. Oh, why is... Okay. Parents and child, nurtured in the way of the Logos. So, of course, we want to be doing our best to have this mature relationship with ourselves and our loved ones. Right now, with or without kids. Well, what happened? Oh, there we go. The Matrix is glitching. Can you see my scroll? The Matrix is glitching out. Okay, that's fine. The way of the Logos, is that what we're doing? If we want to have this kind of relationship and be this kind of person, are we nurturing ourselves in the way of the Logos? What does that mean? What does nurturing ourselves in the way of the Logos have to do with... Thumbs up? Thumbs up, Flamingo? Thumbs up. What does it have to do with... what does being nurtured in the way of the Logos have to do with reaching the highest stages? What was it? Highest reaches of the mind. Are they together? Are they the same? Well, we were just talking about using the Logos to reach the highest stages of highest levels of mind and philosophy. Is it a way of being? If the opening of this paragraph, let's go back to it, is true, can we be being nurtured by the Logos all the time if... Where's my scroll bar? Oh, these Macs don't have a scroll bar. Here we go. It's invisible almost. Oh, I'm just drawing on the... Oh, my goodness. View content page. Okay, don't have content. Okay. Where's that? There we go. It is entirely possible to verify for oneself that we are part of a caring and intelligible universe. This is how it opens. The verification is a kind of proof, since it is a way of understanding that is based upon the realization that our mind constantly communicates with us and for our benefit. The communications from the mind are as profound as they are utterly appropriate to our circumstances. For while the scope of the mind is pervasive, its precision is always directed to what is personally significant. Meaning, if the mind is all pervasive and it's constantly communicating that which can benefit, which would have to be the Logos, are we able to be constantly in a state of nurturing ourselves through the way of the Logos? If that state is possible, is that the kind of verification or proof that we just read about that we need to make for ourselves? And is that only possible as a consequence of this kind of mature relationship? that you can only develop with your children or your loved ones or your friends. By playing this game, learning to master the Logos, dialectic, and midwifery. Or mastering the art of the Logos. Or min-maxing a life where you are nurtured in the way of the Logos. In other words, being in the game, perhaps, can open you up to that realization that this nurturing in the way of the Logos can be an always state of being. If the opening paragraph is true, that the mind is constantly communicating with us in an all-pervasive way. We are surrounded by mind, which is itself of the nature of Logos, which is therefore communicating, creating, and sustaining each moment while communicating to us in a way that is profound, beneficial, and precisely directed to what's needed. High levels of wisdom and knowingness and intelligence, as well as high levels of care. So it's kind of the model for what we want to be. That opens another question. If it's the model for what we want to be, while we nurture ourselves in the way of the Logos, the end goal would be in the highest possible reach of the mind, as we read, and as we are doing the Logos as well, the highest possible kind of functioning in that perpetual state of sharing in the Logos, but also benefiting anyone else through that state of being as the goal. In which case, would we be the same as that all-pervasive mind that we are being learning, that we are being nurtured in, that we are learning to be participating in or sharing in the highest way? Is that what we become? In which case, is it a kind of way of understanding the sense of oneness when ousia, or mind, turns about to know itself completely through likeness? These are some good questions we can wonder about as we wonder about what in the heck does it mean to be nurtured in the way of the Logos, because this is the answer to what would be the best kind of family and upbringing. I've been sinking in my chair this whole time. There we go. So, that's what we're after. Living a life nurtured in the way of the Logos. And all those other questions we keep through. Being true friends and lovers of one another. Wow. Okay, I don't think Pierre would just be saying something like that off the cuff without a good reason. Let's highlight. This is doing this, being nurtured together in the Logos, in the way of the Logos, is being true friends. Being true friends. You are my true friend. You help me nurture self in the Logos. Or and lovers, okay? Does that mean like your romantic partner, in order to be a true lover, would have to be this? Or is this the true idea of what loving anyone is? If loving involves, we can wonder. So being nurtured together in the way of the Logos is what it means to be true friends and true lovers of one another, offering not the slightest hint of so that's what we are doing. And what are we not doing? So we're getting a positive and negative, which means you watching can pull out your book or your notepad or your phone and do a wee dialectic. Put on one side the positive, one side the negative. Pick which of these, where these terms would go in the 4 categories. Why? That's what we're doing. That's the thing. That's the middle thing that we're here to do. Between receiving a pathologos and doing it, or before we were born and after we die, in that period of time in the middle, that's what we're learning to do, the dialectic, which means you can do it for this one here, if you want. So, And I can say that because I recognize the pattern. There's a positive and there's the negative. So the positive is what we are doing, being true friends and lovers of one another. That can be your definition. Okay, you can use what we've been reading here to give a demonstration of that definition, push the implication and the division, and then come to a new conclusion. 4 stages. On the other side, you can have this part here. What are we not doing? We are not offering the slightest hint of opposition to the logos. Ride that wave, baby. This is a surf chicken. He's riding that logos wave, offering not the slightest opposition to it, but settling all their differences justly in an atmosphere of sincerity while respecting the integrity of one another. I don't like the word respect, but I get what he means. Only because it's a loaded term, but we know what he's saying. So, in a disagreement, what would it be? How would you settle your differences justly in an atmosphere of sincerity while respecting the integrity of one another? He's not telling us what we would be doing. He's telling us some aspects of it or qualities of it. What would you be doing when you had a problem with your true friend or true lover? But have those things. Given that it is likely that they would naturally become a family of natural philosophers. Oh. A wild family of natural philosophers appeared in the brush. Do you throw your Pokemon ball? I don't know. And among those they interrelate with, it is likely that they would do everything they could. Here we go. So we have this natural family evolving, but also we have, that I guess would be a demonstration, having been affected, so self to other in your dialectic, having been affected, what is this other? Then how does it affect other others? This other here. Just to revise. Here is our dialectic. Title, if X. For this it'd be if we had a mature relationship within our family, our friends, or our lover. We had a true lover, if it exists. How would you define it? Subject in relation to itself or self to self, S to S. This one here. Then that thing you've just defined, this S, how does it function? How does it demonstrate? What would that state of mind be? What would that way of being be? What would that relationship be like? Now, what you've just defined here as the subject having affected you, or these new natural family members or philosophers, how do they go off and affect others? That's division. Then after that division, you can take either of these others, synthesize it together, find a key term, having seen something new about the self-logos, having gone through this activity in the space of time between experiences, between what we just read in the book, and we will continue to read more in the book, but we're taking a break. In this break between the reading of the words in the book, we have to go through this dialectic process, which we just saw. And as a result, we come back to the beginning with a new idea or insight into the topic. That synthesis is the insight or the key idea or the causal thing, causal aspect or the principle behind it. Whatever it is that unifies it, that synthesis, and then you take it back to the original. Now you have this first definition plus what you learned here. You have benefited in that gap. And now you have another experience. We read more and we see if having gone through this activity changes you. Now, this is not how we've been taught to read. or taught how to participate with podcasts. But I'm encouraging you to do it. Here's what the table looks like. There are only 4 categories in a positive, and what happens if it doesn't exist? If this kind of way of being doesn't exist? Well, you would be, what do we say? We offer opposition to the Logos would be one of them. And then after having done this, see, that's you. That's how happy you are while you're doing it. Look how happy you are. Oh my God. I've never seen you more happy. That's you doing the dialectic. After having done this in the gap between reading, we're going to keep reading. And you are going to wonder if this had an effect on this. In which case, are you going through a kind of development? Does that development help you be more present, more rational, see more of what's there? In which case, is it a mindfulness development? If so, are you proving or validating or seeing what you're reading by having demonstrated it? Are we demonstrating what we're defining? Being a dialectic. But let's keep going. Let's get some more material for our dialectics in our reflection. So we recognize others to others because, and among those they interrelate with, so there are other others that they're interrelating with. What is that? Not my little. Here we go. And among those they interrelate with, the other others, it is likely that they would do anything they could to diminish the scope and the power of any pathologos they encounter. Once you see it, and you understand it, and you've experienced it, you've verified it, how could you not? How could you not want to do your best to benefit others through simply doing your best to diminish the scope and power of any pathologos you encounter? There are some people who do it naturally. Which is a wonder to see. Certain streamers, maybe, let's say, have people come in with their false opinions, their ignorance. It's a popular streamer. And it's amazing to watch this happening. The streamer, because of their intelligence and their affinity to bestowing benefit, caring, as we are saying here, whether they're making fun of the person's silly beliefs or reasoning through it or showing a different point of view, they are, in effect, doing what they can to diminish the scope and the power of the specific false belief that they are suffering from, that makes them right-wing, that makes them a Trump supporter, that makes them a Nazi, that makes them a fascist, or that makes them not see the harms of capitalism. Any of these things. Root causal belief that they're suffering from. So the good people out there are doing what they can to diminish the scope and power of the ignorance that they are encountering, the false beliefs in those people. Now the next stage would be this. Might need different conditions or a different environment to engage in this level of reflection. But ultimately, I think it's where we're heading. Which would be, hey, why were those Nazi beliefs appealing to begin with? Or why was, when Trump come along, did you identify with him? Why do you like the ramblings of this terrible streamer who justifies the genocide? Why are you a fan of Jordan Peterson or something. In other words, what was the original fundamental belief of self and reality, the world in yourself, that had to exist first for the conditions for you to accept participation within this group or to be affected by this kind of ignorance? That's what we're doing here. We're not overcoming one problem, we're overcoming the cause of our problems. Which is neat, and it's doable. And, of course, when you've seen that, and you've understood that, and you've benefited from that, you would probably want to do your best to help others in a similar way. I do. In accepting the... How much time do we have? Yeah, got a bit of time. In accepting the pathologos, there is a sacrificing. Okay, so can't have both. What do we sacrifice? We sacrifice a more mature seeing for an infantile belief. This is neat. Hooray. I pressed all the drops because I'm excited that we have in the book infantile belief, which is a synonym. Is synonym the right word? Homonym. It's almost exactly the same as what we've been saying. Baby brain. Baby brain, formerly academic, because this is an academic text. It's got the validation studies in it next. The only form of therapy that has gone through the empirical scientific validation studies, which is in the back of this book, part 2. Look, I need you to see these figures. See these figures here. I need you to have a look at these figures. See the stats. See here, science. And I need you to see these charts. These charts here. Look at these figures. See the figures in the charts. See science. It's in there. It's in there. So, as this is a academic text, we have the academic definition for baby brain. Infantile belief, right here. So if you want to say baby brain in your thesis, make sure you use the word infantile belief instead. But we know what it means. Okay? In accepting the pathologos, there is a sacrificing of a more mature seeing for an infantile belief and a baby brain way of being. And in that transition is the origin of our, here we go, resentments and anger. So we're all angry. The cause of our anger and our resentment that we project onto others and spend our life playing out the negative dialectic implications of reacting to images, projected images that we're angry about, instead of the origin of our resentments and anger. That's the kind of life most people live, and the problems in most relationships. But we can do the opposite and get free of it and wonder about why it's there in the first place, of course. More questions. Can't have enough questions. We're greedy for questions. Oh, we're greedy. Ooh, nom, 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 eating the questions on the microphone. Nom, 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 nom. That's where the questions live. Questions come from the microphone. That's how I'm getting them. Oh, they're greedy. Greedy farm animal, flamingo, and chicken. So, developing questions as we go through this process of addressing the origin of our resentment and anger. The cause of our fundamental anger, word cause always jumps out, is that at some level we are aware. Some level we are aware of our condition, and we resent having been tyrannized by those we have loved and at times held in high esteem. At some level, we are aware of this injustice we have suffered and resenting and angry at the fact that it was someone who was supposed to help us. Remember, and we held in high esteem someone who was supposed to be loving, and so on and so on. Remember, in the Phaedo, Socrates says, beware of this. Whatever you do, when this happens to you, realize it's your own lack of the art of the logos. The thing that we are nurturing ourselves in, the way of the logos, it's your lack of mastery of that was the cause of you being betrayed. It's not your fault, you were a baby, but the problem isn't reality itself, that these jerks took advantage of you and you were in a position where you held them in higher esteem. The problem isn't belief, the problem isn't reality, the problem isn't that you actually suck, it's that you have to develop the art of the logos. Had you had it then, you would have seen through the garbage. Hooray. And if you do, you get a round of applause. It is our anger that fuels the path of logos. Wow. Anger that fuels the path of logos and deprives us of our much needed clarity of mind. So, we are seeing a few different things. We are seeing A, our job is to be nurtured in the logos. B, if we have friends or lovers, that would be the kind of relationship we would want to have. C, as a result, we can participate in the highest levels of mind. D, that kind of participation and understanding of the logos are needed to benefit our friends, and once we see that, it's likely we'll probably want to do as much as we can to help others in a similar way, artfully. So there we have the art of the logos. Adding to that, a new clue we've been given, clarity of mind. So there is some important feature that clarity has. Notice clarity isn't the highest reach of mind, the brilliant light of being, or logos itself, or justice itself, or beauty itself. These are the things that are experienced that you can see upon reflection and applying the dialectic to it and reflecting on the experience of mind itself. But clarity, that's something new. So a clarity of mind is needed as well. Getting clues to what it would be like to have true mastership, or be living in self, or have reached your destiny, or done your work, or graduated Earth school, whatever, however you want to say it. It's important to keep the hypothesis and questions alive, keep the imaginations going. It starts as an imagination, of course. So, doing our best in our relationships to free our friends to diminish the scope and power of the pathologos, nurturing each other in the logos, kind of mature relationship that's rare, so that we can master the dialectic, as well as experience the highest reaches of mind, as well as the clarity of mind, while doing all those things. And when some personal injustices are experienced that contains parallels to the dynamics to our pathologos. What's that? A parallel to the dynamic? That sounds like symmetry. Symmetry can remind us either of beauty, or we look for symmetry, we look for repetitions in our problems, don't we? And formally, the dialectic, that's this thing here, the division. You have all these different things happening in division, but it's here in the synthesis, you have to synthesize. What is the thing that is paralleled? What is the thing that is reflected in each of them? What is the thing that's symmetrically reflected or has parallels? That thing could be the synthesis. Anyway. Fun. So, that's a little foreshadowing, getting ahead of myself. If a personal injustice is experienced and it contains parallels to the dynamics of our pathologos, then we give birth to deeply bitter resentments and we nurse a sullen fury. Ooh, sullen fury. That sounds like the 4th song in a cool album. Okay. We give birth to deeply bitter resentments and we nurse a sullen fury. Okay? Not the kind of nurse you want. Not the kind of sexy nurse that you dream about. This is nursing a sullen fury. Oh man. I didn't know what button. I don't know where those buttons are, so it was either going to be a laugh or a boo, and I got booed. Oh man. The withdrawal from meaningful conflict deprives us of entering into mature mindfulness. Meaningful conflict, that's interesting. And keeps us from participating on the highest level of our ideals. So, that list we've been developing of what it would be like to have the art of the logos, clarity of mind, participation in highest levels of mind, but also the highest level of our ideals. That's interesting. Having an ideal is part of the game. Not just defining it, but demonstrating it. The consequence of accepting such falsehoods unknowingly is to be deceived about what is most vital to us. No one would accept that consciously. We experience greater turmoil. That's a different color. We experience greater turmoil over personal injustice than confronting cowardice and ignorance. What does that mean? The cowardice and ignorance to face injustices are easier to address than the actual injustice itself. That's interesting. These elements of the pathologos. What elements? Anger. The injustice. The intimidation. The cruel satisfaction. The Joker smile. Ugh. Are the materials out of which the human drama has unfolded. What materials? Anger. Injustice. Intimidation. So the anger is ultimately about the injustice we suffered from our pathologos. The intimidation is what maintains it. Look at all these proofs for how bad you are. The cruel satisfaction at being the bully instead of the bullied, passing on the tradition, the feeling of whatever superiority. Remember, all those things that we sacrifice, nurturing the logos, participation in the higher states of mind, clarity of mind, and what we just had here, participating on the highest level of our ideals. These are all things needed for actual knowledge, actual mastership, actually being a guru, actually having, being worth listening to. But those are all the things that all human beings sacrifice when they are young to get the pathologos. Therefore, all of the necessary qualities to true knowledge and mastery are absent. So if we all seek true knowledge, if we all seek mastery, if we want to have our opinions listened to, if we want to actually do good, where is it going to come from? Because the conditions are not there. We sacrifice them to get the pathologos. The only thing left is this: the cruel satisfaction in being a participant in the pathologos instead. The image of knowing, image of strength, the image of guruship. You're not actually teaching a moral lesson. We saw that. You're doing the opposite. You're teaching an immoral lesson in an immoral way. But unless we are doing midwifery and the dialectic, what's the alternative? Therefore, between the last person being angry and getting the cruel satisfaction in torturing people, the last tyrant who did that, and between him and the next one, there's a period of time where we can all do this. And reclaim the elements needed for actual mastery, knowledge, and art. So these are the materials. The anger, the injustice, the intimidation, and the cruel satisfaction are the materials out of which the human drama has unfolded. They are not new discoveries or new creations. We have brought them together so that their role and function can be comprehended within philosophical midwifery. These are not groundbreaking discoveries that we have anger, that we are struggling with injustice, that the people who have the most injustice within their soul, suffered the most injustice, are more likely to project their own problem onto another person and then angrily act out their pathologos to them, like the genocide happening in Palestine. Intimidation, look, they're fighting back against our genocide. It proves that there were barbarians all the time. That's just intimidation. The definition we got earlier in the text, that it's just using whatever evidence you can to back up the original image and judgment of the other person. An image and judgment that necessarily involves them being the cause of problems, which is baby brain, because there are many causes, including this, but also baby brain because there's only one step of causal links. Bad person did bad thing, so the bad thing happened not because of ignorance or false beliefs or pathologos. Oh no, that would require mature reflection, the kind of relationship that we want with our good friends and true lovers. But we don't have that. We're not reading this book. We are. Other people are kind of stuffed, screwed. So what's the narrative given to explain? Bad person did bad thing. That person is innately bad, or a savage, or a barbarian. Just pick any of the descriptors being used to describe the Palestinians by the Western imperialists or the State of Israel. Barbarians, whatever, less than human, something like that. Innately bad, original sinners, heathen, goyim, whatever the heathen is the Catholic version, but every religion has their word that innately vilifies or says they are innately wrong anyone who doesn't believe the crappy belief that is being used to bind this group. That's intimidation. Making that baby brain assessment that you are innately bad, number one, and another baby brain innately the cause of the problems that we have. Therefore, and everything I point to proves it, that's intimidation. And there is a cruel satisfaction. Anyone who's seen all of the TikTok that have been coming out of the Palestinian genocide, the Israeli soldiers dancing and cheering and getting a cruel satisfaction of having murdered Palestinian people, children included. So what? So it's the same old thing. Same story, different day. What? This guy has to admit no one seems to be learning or growing or addressing any actual problems. But here we're seeing that these are just universal elements to human conflicts and drama. These are not new. We know that this is happening to some degree. Everyone has an awareness of this at some level. We are just pulling them together so we can comprehend the role of each of these elements and the function within the framework of philosophical midwifery. Which means our problems are understandable. Which means they're also solvable. No, that's not a theory. Well, it is, but it's also provable if you don't eat a monkey. Okay. Let's keep reading. We've got a bit of time. All traditions deal with this drama. Do they? And they have a variety of ways of doing so. We find it is dealt with with an exceptional form by the Hellenic most inspired poet. That's a description Socrates gives to Homer. Indeed, we can see this drama take on an archetypal expression. We have an archetypal expression, how do you say that? In the plight of Achilles in the Iliad. Achilles, Brad Pitt played him in a movie. The movie was based on a book by Homer. A poem, an epic poem by the most inspired poet. Let's hear about Achilles. Achilles had suffered humiliation when his commander Agamemnon took from his tent the prize he loved, his balloons. Achilles loved balloons. No, it was Briareus. Briareus. Oh, I don't know how to say that. Okay, let's find out. So, this lady, Briareus, was taken from his tent by Agamemnon, and the inner rage he experienced, it seemed pretty justifiable, fueled his dream for revenge. That's not how you deal with injustice. He refused to lead his troops into combat against the Trojans, for he wanted Agamemnon to suffer full measure, pain for pain. I suffered, so why shouldn't everyone else? An eye for an eye. Surely we can't try and be better. Do unto others what was done unto you, just like the Pathologos. So we can see already the elements being represented dramatically. The elements we've been reading and learning about together here being represented dramatically through this mythology, through the story. Specifically, doing unto others or passing on the tradition that we're saying. And the, what do we call it? The cruel satisfaction that you would get after inflicting revenge, an eye for an eye. So, Achilles wants Agamemnon to suffer full measure, pain for pain, dishonor for taking away his beloved. No gifts of any kind from Agamemnon could persuade him otherwise. Even the return of... Interesting. So he even got... Okay. Taking away his beloved. No gifts. even the return of his Briasus. Achilles carefully nursed his anger, right? What are we doing as we're playing out the dialectic? Well, if we are, whether we like it or not, playing out a dialectic of the pathologos idea of self until we wake up to this game, and hopefully have fun joining in and playing. And you could say, what are we doing? If, so we're here, like we could say this is the dialectic we should be in if the self exists. If the self-logos exists as well, understandable. But if it doesn't, if philosophy and midwifery don't exist in our life, what follows? We are living this life. Have a definition of ourself that's false. Have a state of mind that's blocked. That's others to others, that we take that state of mind in what we do. Then we come to a conclusion. From that, we find a theme that proves this is the self-intimidation or the self-fulfilling prophecy. Proves this to be right all along. So you get stuck in this cycle of illness. So what? So what you're doing is, by maintaining this, refusing to participate in ousia, self-reflection, refusing to learn the art of midwifery or philosophy from our reading of Plato on the other videos, what you're doing is maintaining this stagnant pool or nursing your resentment. So it's not that we are born into our world with a pathologos that we can remove and then learn what's true about self, logos, and reality. Not only that, if we don't do it, not only are we continuing to pass it on as we've just read, but we are ourselves adding. We're adding it, we're nursing the anger, we're building it, we're proving it again and again, this false belief about ourselves. We're doing bad by living a life without logos reflection, without midwifery. So nursing his anger is what we last read, and it goes back to nursing a sullen fury here. On this part here. So our author, by using these words, he's helping us see. Remember all those words we just read, like nursing a sullen fury? Well, Achilles is nursing his anger. So there's a key word there that pivots in both directions. If this is the term in midwifery, this is its analogical equivalent in the story of Achilles. I presume that's why he's using that language. Repeating. What's that repetition? Symmetry. The pattern. So what we're reading about, the kind of pervasive symmetry allowing us to the material to practice this dialectic, that is all pervasive in reality in each moment that we are reading about and learning about, is also being used in the text. The symmetry, the word nurse, telling us that there is an analogy at play here you can mess with, you can play with, you can wonder about. You can do a dialectic on. Achilles carefully nursed his anger, which for him was as sweet as dripping honey. There we have yuck. The Joker smile, or the sadistic, what was it called here? The cruel satisfaction. Facing utter defeat before the Trojans, Agamemnon sent Lord Nestor, Odysseus, and Lord Phoenix as emissaries to persuade Achilles to give up his anger and join in the battle. What will be the equivalent? Is there anyone fighting the battle right now? The battle for truth, understanding, care and benefit. There are a few out there. Today I saw a stream from one who went out of her way to make the point, don't give in to doomerism. Don't allow the bigots the satisfaction of giving up your spirit. That's what they want. They can play out their pathologos with impunity. Join in the battle, we say to you, Achilles. The Achilles watching this, the hero of your journey. We say to you, join the battle. For the way of the Logos. Join Team Reason. The last of the emissaries to try to convince Achilles was Lord Phoenix, and it was in his speech that we can see the depth of Homer's insight into the human condition. We have a depth of Homer's insight into the... Wow, I didn't get anywhere close to highlighting that on the line. The depth of Homer's insight into the human condition. There we go. I always get this underneath. In sharing with Achilles the youthful experiences and struggles he had with his own parents, it becomes clear how parallel their lives have run. Again, a repetition of terms. So go back to when we read about parallel. I'll help you. Where do we read parallel? Up here. Or we can do a word search and cheat a little bit. How do you spell it? Parallel. Here we go. Get rid of the... Okay. When we some personal injustice that is experienced that contains parallels, and we're using these little clues from the author to stitch it together for our own understanding. Parallels to the dynamics of our pathologos, then we give birth to a deeply bitter resentment and nurse a sullen fury. We see Achilles in the Iliad nursing his anger and it being sweet as honey, as sweet as dripping honey, as he nursed his anger. But also parallel. So instead of being triggered by events, thoughts, drama that have a parallel to the actual injustice we suffered and that we are angry because we have yet to address in midwifery. When parallels to our origin scene, so it's a kind of false analogy. If those parallel experiences come up in our lives, we can play out our anger. And if we're successful, if we can get away with doing our pathologos, we might even get a cruel satisfaction. So that's the unjust, harming our own soul and harming others way of reacting. But here is an alternative parallel that we can put in our own dialectic. I hope you're doing the opposite, the positive expression of the parallel, which is seeing the parallel between Achilles' lives and key elements and dramas and his dad's. Lord Phoenix was the surrogate father of Achilles. A different kind of seeing of parallels and symmetry. Or what's symmetry and parallels evidence of? Intelligibility, understandability, intelligence, mindfulness. There is an intelligence and mindfulness behind our problems. Meaning, if we're developing this kind of relationship, being a true friend and true lover with ourselves, then that's what we are nurturing ourselves in, the intelligibility of everything, especially our problems. That's being nurtured in the way of the Logos. And we have a demonstration of this in the book. Lord Phoenix becomes clear. Okay, so In sharing with Achilles, Lord Phoenix shares the youthful experiences and struggles he had with his own parents. It becomes clear how parallel their lives have run, and how Lord Phoenix's pathologos set the pattern for Achilles. We learn through this episode how, so it's the pattern. So we are playing out a pattern. So we talk about causes. One of the physical causes is a blueprint. You want to build a house, we've got material causes. We mentioned this a moment ago in our text. But in the physical world, the material causes for a house is like wood and nails. You also need blueprints. On the next level up, not the physical creation of things, but our psyche, we are ourselves adhering to a kind of blueprint, the pattern of our pathologos that we inherit, as Achilles did from Lord Phoenix. We learn through this episode how an exploration of motives leads to an understanding of the drama behind the manifestations of the pathologos. For Lord Phoenix recalls to Achilles that he was his surrogate parent, and he had experienced much the same as what Achilles was facing. Interesting. Phoenix concludes with a story that presents the archetypal hero. What we are doing. My contention is we are doing that right now as we master the logos together. As one who must face and solve his own personal crisis before, again, yourself first. Know yourself first. Master the logos yourself first. That's the most important thing. He can fulfill only after you've solved your own personal crisis, which we can recognize as pathologos. Can you fulfill your destiny as a hero? It is only after one is free of the burden of suffering that a hero can meet his destiny. So we're also learning that our suffering is tied to our pathologos. And to be a true hero, according to Homer, we would have to remove the burden of our suffering by freeing ourselves from our pathologos. The word we would use to translate this idea, suffering, does not contain all that is in this notion. Indeed, the image and idea of suffering in our time has its roots in the Christian image of the Passion of Jesus. Wow, that's big. The trial and punishment and crucifixion. This is what we think is suffering. But the suffering of Jesus was that of a victim. And suffer in different ways. In a cosmic struggle that has no kinship with the suffering of Achilles. Different kind of suffering. Achilles isn't being tortured and abused and crucified. What's different about Achilles' suffering? Further, today we have a new image of suffering. So hooray. We have a new image of suffering, everyone. Hooray. I'm joking. Why is that good? Today, we have a new image of suffering that is as different from that of Achilles as it is from the Christian image. Ours is drawn from the terrible, detailed... So its roots are in the Christian idea of torture and crucifixion and trial. But ours is drawn from the terrible, detailed reports of the horrors of state-directed torture against those whose only crime was to have been given the appearance of being in some way tainted for having an unorthodox belief. Right? Right? Is that what we're doing? Yes. The horrors of the monolithic state with its carefully prolonged makes the money, right? Yeah, someone's got to buy the guns. And agonized scientific torture. How else will we get new scientific discoveries unless we have fun? I mean, it's not fun. Don't listen to Dick Cheney. Torturing people is not fun. I don't care what Dick Cheney said. How else will we gain nature's secrets unless we torture nature? Do experiments. Okay? Obviously, I'm making fun of these ways of thinking. They are terrible and wrong. Not only are they stupid that you want to learn about the principles by torturing the physical world, also the terrible dehumanization of who you're torturing. Add on that the systems in place that would somehow financially reward this perpetual and prolonged torture of human beings. Take away all of that. Even without all of that, it's divorced entirely from being. It's not how you learn about the natural world. It's not how you harmonize with reality. With its concentration camps, and it just keeps getting worse. Concentration camps, gulags, Pol Pot's madness, genocide, relevant today, repressions, deprivations, kidnapping, selling of children, starvation. The list seems endless. All of these things unnecessary and avoidable right now. With the addition of out of the logos. And we done. It's good news. The list seems endless and has given us a new kind of mass suffering. Okay. Yep. The perpetrators of this terrible suffering are most likely to have been severe victims of pathologous suffering. Let's highlight that because the time of the recording, the Jewish state who suffered a genocide is in the process of doing the same thing to another race or culture or group of people. The perpetrators of this terrible suffering, which includes genocide over here, are most likely to have been severe victims of pathologous suffering themselves. So, at the end of the war, what should we have done? A lot of midwifery to understand the suffering that the Jewish people went through, any of those tortured by the Nazis. What could have been the thing that the culture needed to learn, if there is an intelligibility, if there is a reason why this happened to come up? Can we learn that lesson so we don't have to do it again? Can we learn that lesson so the victims don't become the bullies next time? What we should have done. And can do now. Hooray. We can do it now. That's our job. To learn the art of the logos and the dialectic. So we can do this. In that gap in the meantime, between chicken and flamingo, there's a gap where you learn how to feed your farm animals. That's a dumb analogy. Pretend I didn't say it. But it's still, you get what I mean. Under the influence... Okay, let's finish this. We're almost finished this section. Under the influence of the pathologos, we can appear civilized, can we? Remember, unless we pick up this midwifery game, what are we bound by fate to do? Be a slave to the false master, the terrible master of the pathologos, playing that out as a dialectic, adding to the tradition, adding to the power of our own false beliefs that bind our soul to that false idea of self, which will affect the way we die and our incarnations. But also, because without the logos there's no way out, our life becomes not only to reach that end, but to hide it or put ourselves in a position where we don't have to face criticism. How do we get away with playing out our pathologos? Again, general statements here. There are exceptional characters and rare kinds of people out there who, even without having been introduced to the logos or the idea of the pathologos, they are walking this path. Again, it would be easier with a community, with them, with friends, buying them coffee and talking about it. Also, the better our language is, the more we can direct ourselves. So adding the logos, adding the dialectic to the lives of those people who are the best of us, the most intelligent, the most caring, and the most graceful or charming in their communication of that which they can apprehend through their intelligence and they want to share through their caring nature. These best of us can only be benefited by, well, understanding it as a whole, which is what we're doing here. So, to the good people out there, we say cheers. So what? So we can appear civilized and polite, right? Even Adolf Hitler made his kids lunch or something. I don't know if that's true. But people, you can always say, oh, but my mother was a saint, or my dad did the best, or this person was well-meaning, or that wasn't his intention. Yeah, but it's still there. Pathologos is still there. That needs to be addressed. Even if we appear civilized, polite, we still nurse a sullen grievance. That's the third nurses. This is the section of 3 nurses. Nursing our sullen grievance. Achilles is nursing his anger, and we can also nurse our sullen fury. Sullen fury, Achilles' anger, and our sullen grievance. The 3 nurses of the pathologos. The 3 nurses of the apocalypse. No. Take that one back. The 3 nurses of our motivation to solve our problems properly. I don't know. Leave in the chat what we should call these these 3 kinds of nurses. Unsexy nurses that we don't want to carry with us. What are they? Our sullen fury, our anger as Achilles nursed, and our sullen grievance. Whose bitter roots we have forgotten. Unforget the roots. So we can appear civilized, polite, yet nurse a sullen grievance whose bitter roots are forgotten. Nonetheless, the twisted drama perpetuates a bewildering chaos in our lives. Now you could say, well, it's kind of good that it bewilders us, so we're curious and put our attention on it. Our willingness to uproot. Okay, this is the next level. This is for us. This is for the good guys. I like saying that. The guys in the game. The best of us. Our willingness to uproot the pathologos, which of course we also said is a kind of moral imperative. We're not to be blamed for having problems, yet we still have a moral imperative to do what? To uproot the pathologos. Willingness to do so springs from the desire to regain the memory of a conflict we lost, so that this time we can enter it fully. Having trained up, having become Super Saiyan, we can come back, enter the fight again with the realization of what our defeat has costed us. The alternative is to remain immature. But that will be increasingly difficult with our increasing insight, okay? So as we play and have fun and naturally min-max our enjoyment of the dialectic, the logos, midwifery and philosophy. We'll have more and more insights, and it'll be more and more difficult to to remain immature. It's just hard to. I think a good example of this is when I learned of the nature of this kind of language, the nature of using a word that implies universal wrongness to the actions of another person. So it's not just I don't like when you told that joke. That joke is inappropriate, universally bad, and blaming the innate badness of the other person, your fault. The joke was inappropriate, and the reason is you are a disrespectful person. You've just reframed, so the intimidation is the joke I didn't like is universally bad, and proof of what? Of the pathologos like assessment that you are innately bad. You have disrespected me. And that's not true or good, and a projection. So there's going to be conflict. As soon as I realize that whenever you hear the word respect or inappropriate or something like that, that vilifies the other person and assigns that baby brain cause, there's going to be a fight. So all of the, this was when I was much younger, all of the sort of drama and gossip and soap, all of the TV shows that were all drama based. I just suddenly lost interest because it's just a formula now. You want conflict? Call someone disrespectful. Call someone any other word, un-American, that makes you wrong. Disrespectful is a big one. Seeing it is no longer interesting. I think that's a similar thing with this. Just as we read earlier, the more that you see for yourself, the significance of becoming free of your pathologos and the significance of the art of midwifery and the significance of this kind of mature relationship between friends and lovers, the more you want to do it all the time, the more you want to share it, the more you want to help people in this way. Equally so, maybe this is what's being pointed to. The more that we see it, the more our increasing insight, the more we have increasing insight into philosophical midwifery, the more difficult it is to stay interested in the opposite. Stay interested in the soap operas, to stay interested in the dramas on TV. Or in this case, stay immature about the root cause of our anger, of our sullen grievance, of the anger and fury we've been nursing, of our sullen grievance that we suffered as the root cause, the bitter root cause, to unforget it, find the root cause that we have to solve the puzzle of, and until we do, we'll project it and respond in a baby brain way to other people, whether we like it or not, because if the situation's going to resemble or mirror or reflect, have similar patterns and themes, we're probably going to be triggered. That's just how it works. It wouldn't be much of the strongest force in the physical world if it didn't have that power. It wouldn't be much of a block if it didn't block us. But when you see it, when you realize all that, when you've reasoned through or heard someone reason, hopefully heard me heard us reason through it right now, after seeing it, it's going to become difficult to remain ignorant of that process, that cause, and this game of reflection that we're in. It's obvious. To those to whom it's obvious. I said "whom" in a funny way. It's obvious to those it's obvious to, which is a weird... I think there's a more clever way of saying that thing, so it doesn't just sound like a tautology. Like boys will be boys. I'm actually... Once it's obvious to you, it's increasingly difficult to do otherwise, or it's just obvious now. To resume that struggle. What struggle? To regain the memory of the conflict we lost, that we have to put on our new boxing gloves of Logos to go back and win that fight, because losing that fight cost us. We're going to win it with the Logos this time. To resume that struggle is to do what? Resume the struggle, enter the fight. That's a good theme. Entering the good fight. It's the theme from today. From our friend streamer today as well. Don't succumb to doomerism. Don't succumb to ignorance. Don't succumb to, we would add to what she said, being comfortable in your problem, not reaching your highest goals, not min-maxing whatever you're trying to do, not doing what's personally significant, and doing that with excellence, and fighting back against the ignorance, harm, and irrationality and immaturity of the pathologos that manifests in all the ways we see it. Fighting back against that, and fighting back in favor of mature reasoned reflection to understand causes and principles, or ousia, self-reflection, and the logos, the structure of reflection. Nurturing ourselves in the way of the Logos, to quote. Yeah. Nurtured in the way of the Logos. Being true friends and true lovers of one another. Hooray. To resume that struggle is to accept the fact that we will pass. You have to accept the fact that we will pass through a different kind of suffering, one as different from the Christian image as it is from the suffering produced, suffering produced by the mindless state, terrorism. Okay? Because our struggle, what's different from the letting yourself be beaten and tortured by ignorant jerks of Jesus kind of suffering, the martyr, or the kind of suffering produced by late stage capitalism, by mindless state terrorism. Our struggle is different because it is as noble as it is necessary. This is the necessary suffering. Those who accept this challenge willingly are guided by the expectation that their lives can be understood. There we go. We've been talking about this today. As rational systems. And so they probe and study their present. This a different color. What do? We probe and we study. What are we studying? The present. What are we looking for? Keys. Keys into what? The origin of what? Our destructive beliefs. That's the end of this section. Big section. Anger and blame. So, join the fight. The good fight. Return to the fight that you lost. Because you're a baby. Just a baby. Come back Super Saiyan up with some logos in your back pocket. And probe and study the present for those things we mentioned. Look for dialectics. Look for repeating patterns. Look for... if you apply the dialectic to the thoughts and states of mind that come up when you're in a problem, you might notice keys that can unlock past instances, which themselves are keys to unlock the origin of that injustice we suffered, the sullen grievance we're carrying, the original injustice against the self that we ourselves concluded without words, so it's not seen. And of course, we're babies, we're not to be blamed, and we didn't have the art of the logos at the time, so nothing to do with blame or anger at ourselves. However, understanding that when blame and anger comes up, it's because of an ignorance of this. It's a baby brain misunderstanding of the cause of our problems without realizing our job is to reflect in this way. True friend, true lover, in the way of the Logos so that we can look for those keys through probing and studying ourselves as we jump into our most significant goals, which would include this. Done with excellence so that we can find the keys into the origin of our unsuspected destructive belief, of our sullen fury, of our sullen grievance, of our what else are we nursing of our anger. The root cause of human problems. It's doable, it's fun, the best people are in this game, and the best people are probably more likely to jump into this game. So if you know someone who is the best person that you know, do your best to introduce this, which is, again, to be expected, as we read. Those who start to see this, it becomes obvious, and they will do everything they can to diminish the scope and power of any pathologos they encounter, especially those they care about, true friends and lovers. So do your best to share this with those sorts of people you care about the most and you think you can get into this game. Enjoy your time between wherever we were before we were born and wherever we're going after. And maybe the way that you enjoy your time could be nurturing yourself in the art of the Logos, which is what we're doing here. And is on the table for us. It's the motivation, this way of being that Achilles finally reaches after he sees his problems. The way of being of mature, rational friend and lover. The way of being where we accept a different kind of struggle. The struggle to reach excellence even though it's scary, even though that's not the way we were raised. Do it anyway. That's the kind of scare, that's the kind of suffering. You're not giving up your goals to be crucified like Jesus. You're not using your power to inflict the worst kind of pathologos and the conditions for the worst kind of pathologos in state-sponsored mindless terrorism or exploitation or fascism or capitalism. You're not doing that kind of suffering. It's a kind of suffering of whatever difficulties that come up in our quest to enter the real fight, the fight for the way of the Logos, the fight for understanding and care, the fight for escaping violence, intimidation, and any sort of punishment, the fight to escape words that vilify or incorrectly universalize personal opinions like inappropriate and then vilify the person doing it. You're disrespectful. You're an illegal. The fight to end that kind of ignorance and perpetuation of negative suffering, to instead champion reason, reflection, understanding, causes, sharing that as best we can to become mature, rational, true friends and lovers in the way of the Logos. That's the fight we're jumping into. That's the fight I'm inviting you into. That's the fight our author Pierre Grimes is inviting us into. The way of the Logos. So, I hope that was interesting. We are at the end of part 5 within chapter 2. I think we've got about 5 more parts to go. Although we are, how far through? That was a big section. So I think we're about, we're just over halfway through this chapter because that anger and blame was a big one. Is important. So have we answered the question? What is blame? Have we answered the question? What is anger really? I think that's the one we addressed today. Blame, I think we kind of concluded on last time, I think. How is it different from what we're doing? If we're not blaming the people who caused our pathologos, what are we doing? Is there a responsibility to reflect on the pernicious entity that's a psychic parasite and binds us to our problems? Do we all have that responsibility? What kind of house would that be? What kind of relationship would that be? And what kind of offspring would you give birth to? Now, in the text, we talked about the physical offspring, the kids. What kind of a kid would you be raising? But speaking of Homer and the Iliad, Socrates in his dialogues points to the fact that, hang on a second, if you have this kind of relationship, the works you'll give birth to could rival. Right, my mixer dropped out for a second there, but I'm back. Socrates puts forward the idea that the works, the philosophical works that you could give birth to in this kind of a relationship could rival the works of Homer, the greatest, most inspired poet, with this fantastic story of the archetype of the hero, as well as the archetype of how to become the hero through philosophical midwifery, thousands of years before we are learning it today. Even that work can be rivaled by the offspring or the creation of people coming together in this kind of relationship. So if you're also doing the philosophy game, you would have recognized from this text when Pierre is saying, oh, what kind of a house would it be? What kind of a kid would you give birth to and raise? The other part of our mind will go off, oh, he's also talking about that kind of offspring for those interested in philosophy, because you'd have to be interested in philosophy to recognize the keyword parallel. He's been talking about parallels all through this section. These are hints. Look for the parallels. That's how he writes. How good people write. Amazing genius, that's right. Look for the parallels, and the parallel would be that not only would you give birth to a kind of kid and raise a kind of kid, but the philosophical works you could give birth to with a person like this and nurture and raise that. Socrates says, in that kind of relationship, you will go beyond even Homer and Hesiod. The Bible and the Quran, you could say, back in those days. But of course, much better. Just for the fact that there's midwifery in there. So, something to wonder about. What could that be like? With that question in mind, I wish you luck in doing your best to share your insights into this with those sorts of people who you think could be a true friend and true lover, so that you can give birth to those sorts of works. And if you do, please share them with us on the channel. Leave a link in the comment section on YouTube. Feel free to join our Discord. Please share your creations or your offspring in the chat. And if it's one of those works that will last in humanity for 1,000 years as an object of reflection on the archetype of the human spirit, the human journey, the human soul, and how to free ourselves from human problems, then I would love to read that or play that, or however you, whatever that creation is that you and whoever you have connected with give rise to. So I wish you luck on finding that person, conveying your insights in the way that we can expect people to want to do once they wake up to midwifery and the logos. And I hope it's successful. I hope they go to coffee with you. I hope you give rise to and nurture that kind of relationship. And I hope the offspring that you give birth to, your philosophical offspring, of course, hope those works last 1,000 years as a light to humanity. And I hope you feel like sharing it with all of us in the Discord too. Thank you so much for joining us. And I will see you tomorrow if you're joining live on the chat with the Mino. And otherwise, I will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining. Oh, and I'm doing music streams now as well. I took a break from music streams for a while. If you're interested, Ed Phoenix Music, you can check me out on Twitch. And Exit Music. Okay, I think I might have played it, but it's when my mixer died. I think I lost the audio. So, here's the outro music for the third time. Thanks. Bye.